I'm not gonna lie, I was waiting to talk about Lake Baikal. This enormous lake is located deep in southern Siberia. It's the oldest lake in the world, and it was created from a rift valley 28 million years ago. It has 20% of the world's available unfrozen freshwater. It may not be much for surface area, but it has more water than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. And when I say this lake is deep, I am not kidding. Just compare it to Lake Superior. Look how it's insane. This lake is frozen solid for a huge chunk of the year. It's known for these insane cracks and bubbles. Yeah, these are methane bubbles. It's pretty much frozen solid with insanely thick ice. And so people drive on it and they run a marathon on it. Lake Baikal has more than 3,500 species of animals and plants. Half of the animal species are completely unique to this lake, including the seal, which is the only freshwater seal in the world. I'm so happy that people love lake talk, but there's a couple things in this video that are haunting me and I want to clarify. I'm not mentioning seal controversy because I made 2 other videos. First, I said Lake Baikal has 20% of the world's available unfrozen freshwater, but then I said the lake freezes. But a lake doesn't count towards unavailable frozen freshwater. That's just like ice, all of this stuff. So a lake that freezes and unfreezes doesn't count towards inaccessible frozen water. Here's the next thing that people were confused about. I said Lake Baikal freezes solid, but I'm only talking about the surface of the lake. Some people thought I meant the entire 5,000 feet of the lake freeze. And no, I meant that the surface freezes solid in the winter, which is impressive for a lake its size. The Great Lakes in North America rarely completely freeze over. Last thing, a lot of people weren't impressed that cars drive on this lake, but the surface area of this lake is the size of Belgium, and your lake at home probably isn't that big, so that's why it's impressive. Oh my goodness, yes, the Lake Baikal seal. This is a very special and unique seal. They are exclusively from Lake Baikal. I did a video on Lake Baikal that you should check out, but it's the oldest lake in the world. And look how landlocked it is. They don't really know how these seals got here. They are some of the smallest seals in the world. There are around 80,000 to 100,000 of these seals on the lake. They find holes in the ice in the winter to go fishing, and most importantly, this is what the babies look like. These seals have a reputation for being the only exclusively freshwater seal in the world, but it's a little bit complicated. There are other freshwater seals, but they have recent saltwater ancestors. So while their current generation lives in exclusively freshwater, they're derived from saltwater and they have saltwater species that are very similar to them, which the Lake Baikal seal does not have, and that's why it's considered unique. Here we go again, Lake Baikal, part 2. Follow the comment for part 1. Recap, located in Siberia, oldest lake on Earth, deepest lake on Earth. That's an insane amount of water. If every person on Earth used 132 gallons a day from Lake Baikal, it would last for 40 years. There are over 2,000 earthquakes that happen here every year. And the lake is expanding almost an inch every year. That's why scientists believe that in 20 million years, it'll be an ocean. Or would it be a sea first? The winter ice formations are incredible. Some of the cracks are up to 20 miles long. And of course, the bubbles. These are caused by methane, which you can actually light on fire, but I don't recommend this. This is the only freshwater lake in the world that has deep sedimentary gas hydrates. That's because this lake is so deep in the Earth's crust. These strange shadows and cracks also form on the surface of Lake Baikal. For a long time, they were a mystery. It's theorized they're caused by mud volcanoes at the bottom of the lake. Oh my goodness, you guys, there's still so much more to talk about with this. Yes, hello. A lot of people ended up asking this. Why don't the Great Lakes have their own endemic seal? And it comes back to the fact that the Great Lakes are about 11,000 years old, so they are babies in geological time. In fact, this ecosystem is so simple that it was pretty much destroyed with the invasive species that came with colonization. Lake Baikal is sometimes called the Galapagos of Russia. It's somewhere around 28 million years old, formed as a tectonic rift valley in the middle of Siberia. So it's had plenty of time to develop its own ecosystem. That's how almost all of the creatures here are endemic to this lake, meaning they can't be found anywhere else on the planet. It's also over 5,000 feet deep, So deep that it has hydrothermal vents at the bottom, which is pumping minerals into the lake. So it has a vast array of life, including lots of special creepy creatures. Yes, hello, we've got Lake Baikal news. And you guys, it has to do with the seal. Yes, the Lake Baikal freshwater seal. Scientists have no idea how these seals ended up at Lake Baikal. While there are other seals that live in freshwater today, the Lake Baikal seal is the only known seal that has been exclusively freshwater for millions of years, meaning it doesn't have any known marine ancestors. But another mystery is how they survive at Lake Baikal. Because there's some 80 to 100,000 seals that live there, the food chain wasn't adding up. How are they getting the nutrients? Scientists have just discovered that these seals have a very special type of tooth, kind of like a whale. So they filter the water for food. They devour itty-bitty crustaceans from the water, which makes them happy and fat. This might be the only reason that they've survived at this strange lake. Dude, this seal was already so special. Yes, hello, I want to show you something. This is your hint. Did you guess Lake Baikal? So many people sent this video to me. This is the ice on Lake Baikal, which can get up to 5 feet thick, which is really impressive considering that the lake has a surface area the size of Belgium. And just in case you don't hang out here, Lake Baikal is, I'm sorry, the coolest lake on this planet. It's the oldest lake in the world and the deepest lake in the world, over 5,000 feet deep. It's frozen for over 5 months in the year, and the cracks come from swings in temperature along with atmospheric pressure. The lake also gets these incredible methane bubbles, which occur because of the insane depth of the lake. The bottom of this lake actually has hydrothermal vents. That's how deep it is. There's also incredible ice caves and magical ice tentacles, not to mention the mysterious ice ring phenomenon, which is currently unexplained. Yes, hello. At this point, my account is basically a Lake Baikal stan account, and I want to talk about why it's considered the Galapagos of Russia. Just to recap, this is the oldest and deepest and strangest lake in the world, isolated in the heart of Siberia. Earth has been tearing itself apart here for the last 28 million years. In fact, the lake is affected by 2,000 earthquakes annually, and it's widening by 2 centimeters each year. In a distant future, Lake Baikal could be a new ocean as the Earth continues to pull apart on this rift valley. At over 5,000 feet deep, something very strange is happening at the bottom of this lake. It's one of the only lakes on the planet that has hydrothermal vents at the bottom. Cold water seeps into cracks in the Earth's crust at the bottom of the lake. It's heated up by magma deep below the surface, and then it's pumped back out again laden with minerals. This is the foundation of a complex ecosystem that survives in complete darkness under the pressure of thousands of feet of water. The vents are also partially the cause for the incredible amount of dissolved oxygen in the water circulated from the top to the bottom through convection. One strange creature at the bottom of Lake Baikal is the oilfish. This scaleless and translucent fish is called the golem yunka, and it makes up 70% of Lake Baikal's fish population. It's a popular snack for the nerpa seal, but if you bring it into the sunlight, it will melt in your hand. There's also more than 350 of this larger than average amphipod species. 80% of all of the species found at Lake Baikal are endemic, meaning they can only be found here. A lot of people asked if we had ever visited the bottom of Lake Baikal, and the answer is yes. And now you can be haunted by this image of Putin in a tiny submarine. I think it's important to mention that despite its isolation, this lake is heavily impacted by climate change and pollution. It's hard to believe because of all of the images of frozen Lake Baikal and how incredible it is, but the waters here have been warming more and more each year. One reason we don't want Lake Baikal to warm significantly is that it's a storehouse for methane. Yeah, those are trapped methane bubbles in the ice. I have an entire playlist dedicated to Lake Baikal on my profile if you want to learn more. Yes, hello. I want to talk about one of my favorite lake-related mysteries having to do with this little seal. One of the only exclusively freshwater seals in the world, the nerpa seal, is from Lake Baikal. And if you followed me for a significant amount of time, you know that this is the oldest lake in the world and probably the strangest lake. Extremely isolated, this 28 million-year-old lake is located in the heart of Siberia. Created by a rift valley, this lake is over 5,000 feet deep, and just for comparison, Lake Superior is only 1,300 feet deep. It holds 20% of the world's available freshwater by itself. That's more than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. And despite the fact that Lake Baikal has a surface area the size of Belgium, it almost always freezes over in the winter with ice that can be up to 10 feet thick. It's also called the Galapagos of Russia because it has over 1,700 endemic species that can only be found here, including the unique nerpa seal with a population around 100,000. However, scientists don't know how this freshwater seal ended up in the heart of Siberia at Lake Baikal. Seals have an ancient saltwater ancestor, however, the lake is almost 1,000 miles from any ocean. There are two primary theories about how the nerpa seal got to Lake Baikal. There is a similar species of seal at the Caspian Sea. Around 5 to 10 million years ago, the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea were combined into an inland ocean called the Paratethys Sea. It's believed that this giant inland ocean may have had connections as far as Lake Baikal, leading the seals all the way to Siberia. The second hypothesis states that Arctic seals may have traveled south through rivers and streams during glacial flooding events around 300,000 years ago. While these Arctic origins are more heavily favored, both hypotheses have a timeline issue. It's believed that the nerpa seal became disconnected from its relatives around 4 million years ago. The incredible evolutionary changes that the seal has undergone to be able to live in this freshwater environment point to such ancient origins. However, neither hypothesis line up with this estimated age, which is why scientists are still not sure how this unique seal ended up in Lake Baikal. By the way, if you didn't know, I'm obsessed with Lake Baikal, and I have an entire playlist on my profile dedicated to it, so you should check it out if you enjoyed this video. Yes, hello, it's Spooky Lake Month where we're doing 31 days of haunted hydrology. Here's the problem. I always want to talk about Lake Baikal, and since this is an official Lake Baikal stan account, I think it deserves its own Spooky Lake episode. In case you're new here, Lake Baikal is the oldest, deepest, and strangest lake on the planet that I would argue is inherently spooky all by itself, but I'll throw in a bit of morbid history. Lake Baikal was formed in a rift valley starting some 28 million years ago, which is how it's so incredibly deep. In fact, it's still tearing apart to this day. They experience some 2,000 earthquakes here every year, and in the distant future, it could be an ocean. Its phenomenal depth is almost uncanny, over 5,000 feet into the earth, which means it's almost a mile deep. And there's something incredibly strange at the bottom. There are few lakes that are deep enough to have hydrothermal vents at the bottom. Cold water seeps into cracks in the lake bed before being heated up by magma in the crust and pumped back out laden with minerals. There is an incredible amount of dissolved oxygen that's circulated through the lake, which is the foundation for this strange ecosystem. In total darkness, potentially thousands of feet beneath the surface, 80% of this complex ecosystem can only be found here at Lake Baikal. This does include the mysterious nerpa seal, the only exclusively freshwater seal in the world. Which, by the way, scientists don't really know how they got here, and this is what their teeth look like. To answer your question, yes, we have been to the bottom of the lake, and I'll just leave you with this creepy image of Putin in a tiny submarine. But I think one of the more unnerving aspects of Lake Baikal is its unique ice, which covers the lake for the majority of the year, and it can be over 6 feet thick. The ice is also part of the lake's morbid history. Russia experienced a deadly civil war in 1917 after heavy losses in World War I. Over 10 million people died in a 3-year period. Near the end of the war, some 30,000 soldiers retreated across Siberia after losing the upper hand. This brutal journey included their families, all of their possessions, and millions of dollars of the Tsar's gold. They were also being chased by opposition across the continent, and in a moment of desperation, they chose to cross the frozen surface of Lake Baikal. With Arctic winds unobstructed across the lake's surface, many of the soldiers and their families froze to death. Their corpses remained like a morbid tableau on the surface of the lake. It wasn't until the spring that their frozen bodies and all of their possessions disappeared into Lake Baikal. And no one really knows where the gold went. I'm definitely biased and I ran out of time, so 9 out of 10 spookies. Yes, hello. You probably know what this picture means, right? Of course, I want to talk about Lake Baikal's ice, which is notorious for being incredibly strange. This lake has so many ice phenomena like the Baikal Zen, or the frozen methane bubbles, not to mention the ice tentacles, and the turquoise ice. Try saying that 5 times fast. But I want to talk about the ice ring phenomenon. Don't let the satellite images confuse you, because this lake is enormous and the ring alone is 3 to 4 miles in diameter. These rings have showed up on satellite imagery from Lake Baikal as far back as 1969. They form in multiple locations across the lake, usually in March and April. For a long time, the theory was that these rings could be connected to the strange gas hydrates at the bottom of the lake. It's one of the only lakes in the world with gas hydrates at the bottom because it's over 5,000 feet deep, located on a pull-apart basin. However, the leading theory today is that these are formed through circulating warm water. This can also be called an eddy, which we normally see in oceans, but sometimes they form in lakes. The water circulating the eddy is 2 to 4 degrees warmer than the surrounding water. They still don't really know what's causing these warm water eddies, but scientists have a few ideas. This includes wind patterns and inflowing water from the surrounding rivers. Yes, hello. I learned something new about Lake Baikal today, and maybe you will too. I feel like if you've followed me for any significant amount of time, then you know that this lake is super weird. It's the oldest lake in the world and the deepest. At over a mile deep, Lake Baikal has more water than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. But there's an aspect to its depth that was new to me. What you have to appreciate is that Lake Baikal is a tectonic lake. Almost all of the ancient lakes in the world, which are lakes that are over 1 million years old, are tectonic in origin. Lake Baikal is situated in a rift valley where 2 plates are pulling apart. The continental rift here is young and active, and it continues to pull apart about 1 inch every year. In some distant future, millions of years from now, Lake Baikal could be at the heart of a new ocean that forms here. Most lakes in the world die by either drying out or filling in with sediment from their incoming rivers. And there are more than 300 rivers that flow into Lake Baikal, so where's all the sediment going? It turns out that that sediment has been building up at the bottom of Lake Baikal, while the rift continues to pull apart. So there's actually 23,000 feet of sediment built up at the bottom of the lake. That means that the bedrock at the bottom, the rift floor, is over 7 miles beneath the surface, which is about the same depth as the Mariana Trench. And scientists can actually take core samples of this built-up sediment. This can help them better understand the 25 million year history of this lake. It also means that the continental rift where Lake Baikal resides is the deepest on planet Earth. Yes, hello, it's Spooky Lake Month and we're doing 31 days of haunted hydrology. If you've been following for a long time, then you know that this is a Lake Baikal Stan account, and I just found out a new piece of morbid history. In case you're new here, Lake Baikal is the oldest, deepest, and strangest lake in the world. It's located on a rift valley where 2 tectonic plates are pulling apart. This is how it became the deepest lake on the planet, over a mile deep and with more water than all of the Great Lakes combined. I also don't think I've said this in one of my videos, but Lake Baikal is almost 400 miles long. It has a surface area similar to that of Belgium, and that combined with the incredible depth is how it holds 20% of the world's available freshwater, all by itself. Another unnerving aspect of Lake Baikal is that it's deeper than you think it is. Over the 25 million years that Lake Baikal has existed, nearly 300 rivers have been depositing sediment into the bottom. You would think that this would lead to the lake eventually filling in, but because it's spreading and deepening by over 1 inch every single year, the sediment just filled in the crack. That means some 31,000 feet of sediment could be built up at the bottom of Lake Baikal. Combined with the depth of the lake, that could mean that the rift floor is deeper than the Mariana Trench. Another unnerving aspect of Lake Baikal is its ice. It covers the majority of the lake with more than 6 feet of ice during the winter months. And this is what it sounds like. Despite the fact that people often drive on this ice in the winter, you can't completely trust it. Which brings me to a new piece of morbid history that I didn't know about. In 1891, Russia began to build the longest railroad in the world. It's one of the greatest engineering feats in history and cost around 2.5 billion rubles in the 1800s, which adjusted for inflation in US dollar is around $52.6 billion today. It's estimated that around 100,000 people worked on this railroad, and most of them were convicted felons. Building the railroad around Lake Baikal proved to be incredibly difficult because of the mountainous region surrounding the lake. So for around 10 years, they abandoned this section of the railroad and used ice-breaking ferries to move people and goods. However, in 1904, a war broke out between Russia and Japan, and it became critical to finish the railroad. They continued to use ice-breaking ferries until the winter of 1905, when the ice proved to be too thick. This is when they decided to build a railroad on Lake Baikal. This makeshift ice bridge allowed for continued connection during the conflict. It turned out to be an incredibly dangerous endeavor because of the unpredictable weather and the treacherous ice conditions. Massive cracks would appear in the ice, dragging wagons and locomotives beneath the surface. One of the most impressive fissures stretched for more than 16 miles across the lake. Japan had a heyday with this and published all this propaganda with Russian soldiers falling through the ice. It's more than likely that lives were lost, but the Russian government didn't keep a public record of fatalities. It's easy to imagine the wealth of history that's probably disappeared beneath the surface. But at this point, we at least suspect locomotives and the Tsar's missing gold. I know I'm biased, but Lake Baikal is definitely 9 out of 10 spookies. Yes, hello. It's not Spooky Lake Month, but I'm back because I want to talk about the Lake Baikal sponge. Yeah, you heard me right. I want to talk about the forests of sponges that blanket the bottom of Lake Baikal. And if you're new here, this is the oldest, deepest, and probably the strangest lake on this planet. Lake Baikal was created by a rift valley pulling apart starting some 28 million years ago. Despite having a smaller surface area than most of the North American Great Lakes, it has more water than all of these lakes combined. And that's because it's over 5,000 feet deep at its deepest point. Surprisingly, the water at the bottom of the lake has an enormous amount of dissolved oxygen. The oxygen-rich environment is incredibly rare among the world's deepest lakes, and it supports a diverse and strange population of creatures. There are over 1,700 endemic species that are only found at Lake Baikal. That includes the famous nerpa seal, which is the only exclusively freshwater seal in the world, and the slightly creepy carnivorous amphipod species, which experienced evolutionary gigantism because of the incredible amounts of dissolved oxygen in Lake Baikal. But the animal with the most biomass on the lake floor is the Baikal sponge. They found the fossilized ancestors of this sponge at the bottom of the lake, and they were over 10 million years old. Just 5 centimeters of a single sponge can filter over 5 gallons of water a day. They're one of the only types of freshwater sponges that create these enormous branches into the water. And they can live for over 10 years because they don't die during the cold season. And that's because they have a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship with dinoflagellates that help them survive when Lake Baikal freezes in the winter. The sponges are also an important bioindicator for what's really going on in the water of the lake. Even with its remote location, the lake has experienced a lot of industrial and agricultural runoff, which has resulted in algae blooms, toxic chemicals, and other pollutants, and a lot of the forests of sponges have started to die. This is bad because the sponges only grow 1 to 3 millimeters each year, which means it could take decades to recover the sponge forests. And believe it or not, it wasn't until this week that the government banned the discharge of untreated sewage into Lake Baikal. While I'm grateful that there's change on the horizon, we need to listen to the sponges, which are telling us that the oldest lake in the world needs our help. Yes, hello. It's not Spooky Lake Month, but I want to talk about Lake Baikal, possibly for the last time on TikTok. As you might remember, Lake Baikal is known for its incredibly thick ice in the winter. The ice can be up to 6 feet thick in certain areas. It freezes solid, which is impressive for a lake that has a surface area the size of Belgium. And in case you don't hang out here, Lake Baikal is the oldest and the deepest lake on the planet. So just appreciate that in some parts of the lake, the ice separates you from over 5,000 feet of water. And recently I was tagged in one of the many ice phenomena that happen at Lake Baikal. This one in particular is called a ice tsunami. This sheet of ice is slowly shattering as it reaches the shoreline, and it's completely caused by high winds. You can kind of see it more clearly here, where the wind is blowing across the surface of the lake. Of course, this makes the most amazing sound. Ice tsunamis are most common on freshwater lakes. They have happened frequently on Lake Superior, and as you can see from this video, they can also happen with much thicker sheets of ice and can actually be dangerous and destroy houses or shoreline. Funny enough, these high winds are also the cause for the Baikal Zen phenomenon. Jump scare. On a more personal note, I'm really sad about what's happening to TikTok in the United States, and I don't really know what it means for Spooky Lake Month. Luckily, we have a few months before October 1st, so I'll kind of pay attention to where the trends are. For now, I have a YouTube and, unfortunately, an Instagram that you guys can follow me at if you want to be there for Spooky Lake Month 2025. I will miss TikTok so much, and it feels bittersweet to do my last video about Lake Baikal, which is the lake that started it all for me. Yes, hello, it's Spooky Lake Month, where we're doing 31 days of haunted hydrology, and one thing you should probably know about this account is we love to talk about Lake Baikal. There's a local legend that the Russian mafia would dispose of human bodies in Lake Baikal because after 48 hours there'd be no flesh left behind, just bones. So today I want to talk about what would happen if you died in Lake Baikal. But first, in case you're new here, this lake is the oldest, deepest, and strangest lake on Earth. Isolated in the heart of Siberia, Lake Baikal is over a mile deep, and even though it's smaller than most of the North American Great Lakes, it has more water than all of these lakes combined. And unlike the Great Lakes, it's also had 25 million years to evolve a very strange ecosystem. Lake Baikal is the only truly deep lake on Earth that has oxygenated waters from top to bottom. I can't stress enough how unusual this is because deep lakes usually lose dissolved oxygen as they get deeper. That even happens in parts of the ocean. And the reason for this starts with the Baikal Rift Zone. This is where the Earth is literally tearing apart and the lake is getting wider and deeper every year. Because of that tectonic activity, Lake Baikal has hydrothermal vents, methane seeps, and even mud volcanoes at the very bottom. And we know this because scientists have gone down more than 5,000 feet in these tiny submersibles just to see them in person. Unlike the hot, belching black smokers at the bottom of the ocean, Lake Baikal's hydrothermal vents simmer quietly in the mud, releasing warm methane gases and minerals into the water. These are the same methane gases that make these amazing bubbles in the ice during the winter. And despite the darkness and the pressure, these vents are anything but lifeless. First, they're coated in these bacterial mats that feed on chemical energy instead of sunlight, creating the foundation for a food chain that's built on methane. You'll also find giant flatworms, crustaceans, and vent-loving fish thriving in the cold. These vents are also what helps circulate oxygen throughout the lake. You combine geothermal circulation plus near-freezing waters, which slows decay, plus deep convective mixing, you get an oxygenated abyss. And then you give it a couple million years and you end up with an ecosystem that's unlike any other on Earth. I think my favorite might be the transparent Golemyunka, which is a cannibalistic oily fish that makes up 70% of the fish mass in the entire lake. But then there's the 350 species of amphipod that live here. Just for comparison, usually a lake might have 1 or 2. They've also experienced gigantism here, so these scavenging little cuties can be the size of a rat. They're the main food source for the Baikal nerpa, which is one of the world's only freshwater seals. They're a species that's lived here for over 2 million years, but scientists can't really explain how they got here in the first place. All of this to say that this thriving ecosystem is actually the reason that you might not want to die here. If your body sank into Lake Baikal, it wouldn't bloat and float like it would in a warm freshwater lake. It also wouldn't be preserved like in other cold lakes that are lacking oxygen. Instead, as you descend to the abyss, there are a lot of things that would like to eat you. Probably not the nerpa, but instead thousands upon thousands of amphipods. These little guys could clean you down to the bone in just 48 hours. So while we're not sure if this is what the mafia did with their victims, it might actually be a smart way to dispose of a body. 9 out of 10 spookies. Yes, hello. There's actually one more thing about Lake Baikal that I can't stop thinking about. It has to do with those hydrothermal vents that are some 4,000 feet below the surface. Scientists were shocked to discover an aquatic insect that lives near these vents. These insects are midges or flies. It looks a little bit like a mosquito. They're larvae, which are bright red because they're filled with hemoglobin so that they can store oxygen in this freezing environment. But they live in the mud around the vents, but then when they're finally ready to emerge, scientists actually think that they take a ride on the methane bubbles. So it's like they're taking an elevator made of gas because they ride these all the way up the water column to the surface. However, scientists don't know how the adults get back down to the bottom of the lake. But still, they're the deepest dwelling insect on the planet, at the bottom of Lake Baikal.